Welcome. Thank you for joining us today with PFLAG's annual candidates forum. We have some questions we'd like to begin with for school board candidates. If I miss anybody when I say these names, please let me know. We'll start the first question. Let me pull it up. First question for us or for school board will be, what ideas do you have for solutions to improve the mental health crisis in our community and schools? Suicide attempts for juveniles were way up during the pandemic. We'll start with Mr. Mitchell.
Hi, thanks. Yes, and I use he, him pronouns. So as you know, if you've seen my candidate statement, child and adolescent mental health is one of the focuses of my campaign. I have extensive background as a pediatric RN in the emergency department setting, seeing kids in crisis, particularly adolescents. And, a lot of those come from different walks of life. They, can be on the one hand, from wealthy, privileged backgrounds. They can also be from poor, even homeless backgrounds. But the one thing they have in common is that there has not been sufficient support given and awareness focused on this issue. So what I'd really like to do is leverage the nurse staffing and health infrastructure that is in place in the schools, which has been increased somewhat during the pandemic, as a way to engage in screening and primary interventions with children, and then partnering with community agencies, for example, WAPAVE, to help support kids who are identified as being at risk for suicidality, self-harm, or even homicidal ideation, or thinking about hurting others. As we all know, there's been terrible episodes of school shootings, mostly conducted by adolescent peers against their own fellows. So there's a lot of opportunity, and I'd like to be on the school board to help leverage those ideas.
Thank you. And let me slow myself down. I apologize, everybody. I'm concerned about your time, and I want to make sure we get through these questions. You have 1 minute to answer. And once we go through these questions, we are going to go around and let you do a brief introduction. I was actually trying to give somebody some time to get in here. The second question, or who's next? That would also, Mr. Boyer's not here. How about Mr. Cliffhorn? Did I pronounce that correctly?
People say Cliffhorn, people say Cliffthorn. Just don't call me late for dinner. Thanks for asking. So there's a lot that we've been working on as a school board in the Olympia School District over the course of the pandemic to enhance and increase mental health supports. So let me go through the very concrete things, then we can talk about some more theoretical pieces to this. So ESSER, the elementary and secondary emergency support funds that the district has received from the federal government to spend over the next 3 years in pandemic response. Of the $16 million in extra funding the school district has, we've used some of that money to increase mental health supports in our schools. Specifically, we've doubled the number of social workers in the school district that are direct school district employees. We've also enhanced our community partnerships with organizations like Behavioral Health Resources, so that we're bringing social workers in to serve some of our most at-risk youth that are eligible for Medicaid.
Hi. Sorry, 1 minute.
All right.
All
Happy
right.
to talk more.
Ms. Huffman?
Hi, thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for having us. So we, as Scott was talking about, that we have really increased the number of counselors and and some of the programs in order to be able to help our kids. But the one thing that we could also do, I think, to help our kids is to help our kids' parents. It is not just something that happens in our own schools, but it is also things that are directly affect them in their homes. And so if we could broaden our outreach to include more families and talk about some of the stresses that not only our students are having, but our teachers and our families are having, I think that would be very, very beneficial. And so I would like to work on expanding those types of programs and those types of conversations.
Thank you. Are there any more school board candidates out there that I've missed? Okay. The next question for school board candidates: do you believe transgender athletes of any age should be able to compete on teams with the gender with which they identify? Mr. Mitchell.
Hi, yes. You know, the NCAA has really done a lot of work around this issue and has established a pretty good standard. I believe it's once you're a year on hormone blockers, then absolutely, you know, there's no competitive imbalance. And, you know, you should absolutely have the right to, you know, participate in society and events in interscholastic sports, you know, as, you know, is concurrent with your identity. So I would, you know, absolutely support participation by transgender athletes according to their gender identity. Again, you know, with instituting some of those well-developed guidelines.
Thank you. Mr. Clifthorn.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that we have to be mindful of the fact that the rule changes on their own that allow participation are a first step. There are significant cultural barriers to equal participation and equitable participation in secondary athletics. And so I think that, related to your first question about mental health supports, that we have a significant amount of work to do to improve the level of trans inclusivity by families and other players. And I think that that's an area where we've been talking as a school board about the importance of expanding equity work of all kinds to focus on what can folks outside of a specific community, whether we're talking about trans families, queer families, however someone identifies, what can the normative folks be doing to be more inclusive, and how can we help them learn those lessons?
Thank you. Ms. Huffman?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with just everything that Scott and Dawn have said. I think that kids have enough on their plates without not being able to participate in sports and other activities in the way that they feel the most comfortable doing.
Thank you. I have one last one for the school board, but please, if you have time, stay, because we're going to have some more that are more general for everybody. Do you support Referendum 90 to require comprehensive sex education in public schools, which passed by the voters last year? And if not, why? Mr. Mitchell?
Hi, yes, I definitely support age-appropriate sex education in the schools. You know, we know beyond a doubt that effective sex education goes a long way towards preventing unplanned teen pregnancy and really helping individuals to understand their own changing bodies. And, you know, as we recognize and become more inclusive in sex education, also the role of hormones in age-related changes and how those can affect feelings and emotions. So absolutely, I 100% support age appropriate sex education, and like what sex education looks like, at the 6th grade level is going to be very different than what it looks like in high school level. And the curricula exists and I believe are being implemented to meet this need. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cliffhorn?
Thank you. Absolutely support referendum 90 and comprehensive sex ed for our students. The funny thing when the referendum passed is the school board received quite a lot of vitriolic email from opponents of the referendum, and were under the misimpression that the Olympia School District was going to be in the business of radically changing our sex ed curriculum. And the good news for our school district is that our sex ed curriculum was already compliant with the new law. That said, I think there are a lot of ways in which we can continue to improve and enhance sex ed in our schools, especially the focus on younger age cohorts. People expressed so much concern about early elementary students having sex ed. And from my perspective, my family's perspective, it's never too early to learn about consent. And the focus on early development of those lessons is a great idea.
Thank you. Ms. Huffman?
Yes, I 100% support that. And part of my support in that is being present during some of the testimony for this bill that was passed, and listening to girls and young women who had been abused by trusted members of their family, and felt like if only somebody had told me that it was wrong, if only somebody had said that isn't, you don't have to let that happen. I think it is never too early to teach our children that it's their body and they can be touched in the way that they want to be. And if it doesn't feel good, then they shouldn't be touched that way. So permission is very important. And I think this particular sexual education that begins in kindergarten is a really good thing.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move over for a few questions specifically for city council members. And my son Robert's going to take that one.
Okay, so what would you do differently, if anything, to address the LGBTQ plus housing crisis, including homelessness, than the approach the current council and administration have taken? And we will start with Ms. Parsley, if I said your name right.
Rob, you did fantastic. Thank you for hosting this, by the way. I would do more of what we already currently are doing. We passed the housing action plan based on a housing needs assessment. And we passed through a public process, our One Community Plan, which is our homelessness plan. And unfortunately, the pandemic made 1/3 of that plan unable to be enacted. So I would actually put forward those two plans and say that those are where we need to go. Are we done? No. Do we have a lot more work to do? Absolutely, we have a lot more work to do. We need to, as a city, take on affordable housing, permanently affordable housing, housing with wraparound services, and we need to continue the work with Home Fund, and we need to encourage our regional partners to pass a Home Fund to allow them to start this work.
Thank you. And Ms. Cox?
Well, I agree with much of what Lisa has already said. Lacey has recently put together a commission on equity that is looking at accessibility through all lenses for policy on down in Lacey. And I made sure that we had LGBTQ representation on that board. I think the Regional Housing Council and the work that it's doing is trying to open up housing opportunities for all. we're certainly working to address homelessness. And I have personally pushed, and I will continue to do so, for a countywide home fund that is going to provide shelter for our unhoused individuals. As Lisa said, there is just tons more to do, and let's roll up our sleeves, people. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Mercer?
I generally don't like to talk about my personal life in these forums, but I think this question brings up an important issue. I came from an abusive household. I was sexually, emotionally, and physically abused. And the only way I got out of that situation was that I moved into a house where, this was 1981, where my rent was $37 a month. When that situation fell through, I moved into a boarding house where it cost me $100 a month to live. So I was able to escape my abuse because I could find a place for $100 a month. Now that's not realistic today, but I would like to see Olympia explore the boarding house model where you get a private locked room, you share a bathroom and a kitchen, but you have your own safe space for a low cost of money. My target would be $500, which is still a pretty idealistic target, but one that could be within reach of the youth that need it.
Thank you. And Mr. Simmons, are you a council?
No, I'm Port of Olympia.
Okay, apologies. Mr. Gilman?
Yes, thank you, Rob. There's a couple of things come to mind. First, I think we all have to acknowledge that a leading cause of youth and young adults on the street is getting kicked out of their house, and a leading cause of people getting kicked out of the house is coming out. And that's not really centered in the emergency housing work we're doing. There are a few at the Billy Frank place. There are a few rooms for youth and young adults. We've got Rosie's place, but this to me is an acute need. When I meet kids who are staying in doorways downtown, is a safe place to go, because that's being out on the streets through no fault of their own and no situation that they created themselves. So I think that needs to be elevated. I'm also open to learning more about other ways that there are specific housing discrimination impacts for LGBTQ plus folks. I think we've got room to grow and learn there. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Reed?
Hello. So in visiting the encampments weekly, we encounter a lot of youth. Last week, I encountered a youth, and I had to leave and try to find some resources. But what my point of this is, in the encampments, the youth are reluctant to ask for resources because we're mandatory reporters. So a lot of the time, their needs get unmet. They're out there with the adults who are doing adult-like things, and they're really suffering and in my opinion, being victimized further. So I think that we need to, of course, when we engage with them, use the harm reduction and trauma-informed care methods of recovery and engagement so that we limit the harm caused to them. And, as far as what the city's doing, I think we need to get more data. We need to find out who's in the encampments, who we need to serve. And then we could apply the appropriate services and get them the help they need.
Thank you. And Ms. Wynn? I hope I said that right.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. Hey, Robert. Okay, I only have a minute. So I think that yes, Olympia is certainly making progress towards housing and homelessness. I think, or as I've learned, it seems as though we are sort of looking at it more socioeconomic, which has its benefits, but it's just sort of who's at the very, very, very bottom, and who is the most vulnerable, and then we got those kind of like middle income earners, and then the highest, but not a lot of attention thus far on who we're serving, and the and not only, you know, are the LGBTQ community members, but also the intersectionality piece of it as well. So I think there's definitely room for that and more learning. Some things coming up is our Equity and Social Justice Commission. You bet that we will be making it a priority to have LGBTQ representation on that, as well as a full equity review of all policies framework going forward for that. And that's my time. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, thank you. There's been a lot of good answers to this. And, you know, in the Regional Housing Council, which Councilmember Cox helped create, we have an RFP on the street right now to do an equity audit of how we do our funding with government funding. And it's really important because, you know, to Councilmember Gilman's point, you know, I used to work doing outdoor leadership programs with homeless kids in Denver, and it was so disheartening to see children just dropped off at the shelter. And we have some law problems in our state, to Ms. Reed's point, that we have to fix so that we can actually have youth shelter. But data is the key. In fact, one thing that a lot of people don't know is Community Solutions is going to be launching a process in Thurston County this fall that will look at data and target populations. And we know when we disaggregate the data and we look at that intersectionality, you know, whether you're Black or Hispanic or female or GLBTQ plus, you know, or +1 of any of those other, veteran, single parent, you know, it exacerbates our problems. And so just being able to look at the data will help us target, back to Councilmember Gilman's point, a pretty significant need that our society doesn't talk about, similar to the senior population. So thank you.
Oh, Mr. Payne.
Yes, thanks, Rob. I'm not sure how much there is to say. There's been a lot of great points made, and I share those sentiments. We absolutely need to collect more data for starters. I know that we also have a very dire need in terms of not just with our youth, but with seniors as well. Recently in Seattle, they opened the first LGBTQ senior center home in the state of Washington. And we know that the county has conducted a needs assessment, which says that our seniors are particularly at risk of falling into homelessness. And I also think that we need to make sure that we are considering the various demographics, including LGBTQ plus youth and seniors in our regular plans. So yes, I absolutely support the Olympia Housing Action Plan, the One Community Plan, but we need to make sure that we're doing better at incorporating these into the standard plans and then going and targeting very specific demographics in addition to that. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Vasquez?
Hi. So in my day job for the state of Washington, until very recently, I worked in workforce planning. And one of the things that my shop focused on is collection of data related to the workforce. And so I had the opportunity to partner with a number of workforce groups in recognition that at the time we weren't collecting data about the LGBTQ community for people who worked for the state. And so we began data collection, but we also pursued a change to the Public Records Act to protect individually identifying data related to demographics for the state workforce. And we were successful in getting that Public Records Act amendment passed in 2019. Data is super important, right? But also protecting the communities that are still at risk of discrimination and harassment is important too. So I've got that experience of changing that system, beginning to collect the data, but also making sure that it's protected from bad actors. And I want to bring that lens to the Lacey City Council. Take a look at what data we're collecting, maybe broaden what we do collect, and then start looking for the barriers that people face so we can break them down.
Thank you. And did I miss anyone? No, okay, moving on. Okay, do you think our main street / downtown is healthy and successful? If not, what would you do to change that? And we'll start off with Ms. Parsley.
Do I think it's healthy? Not 100%, no. I think when I was sworn in 2018, we had a serious problem. We had people camping on the downtown streets. We had unmanaged camps that were super unhealthy for those that were in those camps. Have we moved this ball forward into the right direction? Absolutely. I live downtown. I walk to work every day. So I have seen the changes. We have more work to do. I think we have to expand our clean team even further than we've done. We have expanded our ambassadors from 2 to 4. And we need to work on enacting the downtown investment district, which gets the property owners invested in the downtown and just instead of just the small business owners, which is the parking and business assessment district, because that will leverage more money for cleaning, for guides, for holidays, for lighting, for intentional design to improve our downtown and make it a place where people want to visit.
Thank you. And Ms. Cox?
Well, Lacey doesn't have a main street per se. And I think, you know, what you're getting at where Olympia has been having its downtown problems shows up along the freeway and Lacey. It shows up on the Department of Ecology campus, and it shows up in small pockets. All of it is not healthy. We have hired 2 mental health specialists and 2 peer counselors who are now working with our police department to go into these encampments and to try to help people find placements, whether it's friends, family, an actual apartment or whatever they can find for them. It is getting better slowly, but it's going to take a lot more effort, and I am devoted to making sure that that happens.
Thank you. Ms. Mercer?
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
I don't know how we can call our downtown healthy right now. It's in crisis. 77% of Olympians do not feel safe downtown at night. 70% are calling for increased law enforcement. There was a shooting in the middle of the transit center on a Saturday afternoon, September 4th. There have been frequent stabbings. A man was beaten to death under the bridges last week. I see young women carrying baseball bats in their backpacks, and they tell me of the sexual assault they face and the harassment. I got stuck downtown last Saturday night on the 9th for 2 hours after midnight, waiting for a cab. And I did not see a single OPD officer in 2 hours of walking around downtown. Not one on foot, not one in a car. And I saw a lot of sketchy stuff happening. So I don't know how we can say it's healthy. It's not. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Gilman?
Thanks, Rob. First, I want to say I completely support the additional social workers we've got downtown, the efforts to light alleys, all of those efforts are good. But I think it's misplaced frustration when you focus on the people who are camping downtown. I think the attention deserves to be on the landlords who've been raising rent just because they can, on the buildings that are sitting vacant, and on the employers who are paying less than it costs to live in our community for people who work full time for them. That, I'm sorry it's messy downtown. I also know that as a community and as a society, we have enough abundance that if it was shared just a little bit differently, we wouldn't have kids kicked out of their house and sleeping in a doorway downtown. And to blame that kid, to my mind, is just plain wrong.
Ms. Reed?
I think Clark was reading my mind. That's exactly what I wanted to speak to is addressing the issues that are causing the folks to be down in the first place. And as someone whose rent went up $200 October 1st per month, and the letter I received was because there's a housing shortage. That was the justification. They didn't even have to give me that. They just did, and it's pretty lame. But I ran into somebody whose rent went up $500 per month, another one who's $300 per month. That's out of control, and that's not something that's going to help at all if we don't figure out some solutions to that. And I know it has to be at the state level mostly, but we need to deal with that. Sorry about my washer. Also, certified peer counselors are important. I'm a certified peer counselor, and so are all of my coworkers. So, I mean, if Olympia could introduce peer counselors into their budget, that'd be it'd make a huge difference in helping folks also.
Thank you. And Ms. Hubin? I probably messed that one up.
Oh, Robert, you're lovely. Don't worry about it. Thank you for your efforts. Okay, so downtown, what a big one, and I'm so passionate about it. I've been living and working in downtown for some time now. Is it healthy? No, not completely. Is it completely successful? No. Is there beauty? Is there community? Is there things that make it worth continuing to invest in downtown? Absolutely. There are wonderful things about downtown. But let's talk about the challenges and opportunities that are also certainly present. We need a downtown where we don't see people struggling, not because they're struggling somewhere else and they've been moved, so visitors and residents that are housed don't see them, but because they're not struggling. I guess I'm wrapping up on time here, so that's my biggest point is many times we hear about the homelessness, and so finding a humane, compassionate way to address the homelessness where they're not receiving services in a fishbowl fashion. Oh, my time is up.
Thank you. And Mr. Cooper.
This is a tough one. I don't know any system in our society that's healthy. So how can I talk about downtown in that microcosm? It is a demonstration of what's broken and fractured. To some council member Gilman's points, we have this housing crisis that's escalating. We have inflation coming at us like a tidal wave. If anybody's watching their cost of goods, a significant problem that the city or the county won't be able to solve on their own. But at the same time, we have the third best sales tax performing area in the county in our downtown. It's vibrant when people are there, but there are people that need help and people that, different populations need resources and services so that they can enjoy what is the downtown for 5 counties. And that comes with some pretty hard stuff and some really great stuff. I work downtown. I love our downtown, but there are people that need more help, and we'll continue to do what we can within our power. But we have a big looming crisis that is much bigger than we're talking about as a society.
Thank you. And Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you for this question. I think that that downtown, is it healthy? I say yes and no. Obviously, everyone has expressed their reasons for why they think downtown is not healthy. I would happen to agree. In fact, I myself share concerns. We just had a hate group that just painted over one of our beloved murals downtown, which we just helped repair yesterday. Do I share safety concerns? Sure. Do I spend time with my family in downtown? And do I feel like it's the epicenter of our community where people come together and celebrate Olympia and each other? Yes. And I love that about the community. And I'm willing to work on the challenges that we have. And I think we can do that in a number of ways by focusing on improving public safety as a whole for the city. And that looks like expanding our Downtown Ambassador program, which we've just done, sending out our police so that there is a community presence and they're not just responding in times of crisis and emergency. And I'm out of time. Thanks.
And Ms. Vasquez.
Everybody else made some excellent points. It's nice to come last because then you just get to mop up everyone else's good ideas. I think that one of the things that I want to do related to making our downtown spaces healthy, and Carolyn's right, Lacey doesn't have a downtown per se, but people still have safety concerns. I think one of the key takeaways on this is that it is a regional issue. Truly, it's a national issue, and we need federal help and state help to address things like homelessness and to balance accountability with appropriate resourcing for law enforcement. I look forward to partnering with the City of Olympia leadership and with Tumwater and with Lacey so that we can support people so that our spaces feel safer and people get the services that they need. It's not a thing that Lacey can do by itself, just like it's not a thing that Olympia can do by itself, but it's really important so that we continue to have communities where people feel safe. And I love downtown Olympia. I go there with my kids all the time, but we've got work to do.
Thank you. Miss anyone? No, cool. Do you think CYS is adequately funded? This might be a little bit more of an Olympia question. Miss Parsley.
Sorry, couldn't find the mute button. After all these months, I'm still lost some days. Do I think it's adequately funded? No. I think we can always put more money into our youth, and especially the marginalized youth. It would be wonderful. And as a matter of fact, the City of Olympia, our council put as our #1 ask of the legislature this year is behavioral health, mental health funding, and chemical substance abuse funding from the state. And I think some of this should be channeled into the youth programs like CYS and all of our homelessness response, because there's a big gap here. When I see statistics that one of the highest portions of youth that are on the street without housing are in the LGBT community, we're not adequately covering this. There's just no way. Simple answer, no, they're not adequately funded. The state should step up and we need their help.
Thank you. And Ms. Cox.
Well, I think the existing CYS leadership is to be commended for the good work that they are doing with the resources they have. And I agree that they are underfunded and they could be doing a lot more. I'm deeply troubled by the suicide rates that we're seeing in the schools. I'm also part of the leadership of the Thurston Thrives organization. And one of the measures for our new kind of thrust around working on racial equity and health equity is looking at the depression rates among 8th graders in the schools. And so all of these things tell me, that if we don't really step up the plate, we are going to have a lost generation. And that just really breaks my heart. We need to do better by our youth.
And Miss Mercer.
Thank you. We need all the programs the other folks are talking about, but I'm going to talk about something different, something a little closer to my heart, and that's culture and the arts. Art saves lives. Again, I'm going to get a little personal. My abusive situation, what kept me alive and what got me out and what got me to transcend it was art. And I see such a role for art in young people that's not happening in school. Like places like Gabby's Cards and Comics, it's a welcoming home where she gets people involved in the arts and creative directions. Queer Rock Camp is another good example of a program I would support. Getting involved in bands. Things like that build agency, they promote good mental health, and they build self-esteem. And those are the foundational building blocks to success in other areas of life. And that's why I believe the arts are so vital to you.
Thank you. And Mr. Gilman.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Candy's right first, that bringing the arts and culture is such a huge boost. I lead the board of the Bridge Music Project, and we were just in Haven House for a residency that was, I think, really impactful for the folks living in Haven House and just an exciting engagement. Is CYS adequately funded? They've grown and grown both geographically and programmatically. So I think they're doing pretty good. The question of whether we have enough services that face toward youth in our community, I think, is the question. I would support not a monolithic growth in one agency, but I think also supporting mutual aid and peer support that come through other scrappy nonprofits. It's an acute need, but I'm not sure that more resources to one agency is the only approach to get that done.
Thank you. And Miss Reed.
So I agree that with Clark once again, that CYS we need more services, and so if that means more funding, then we need more funding for that. I think building a community center downtown for the youth is a good idea. Where that would go, how that would happen, but just something for the youth to do. And that's what I hear them say when I talk to them. Another thing that's really close to me is the youth overdose rate. And we distribute a lot of Narcan downtown, and so do other agencies and organizations. And while folks are utilizing the Narcan, thank goodness that folks are surviving, that a lot of our youth are out there, in this situation. It's again, back to, more services to prevent homelessness, for more providers, and then also dealing with the issues that they're facing out there is really important. Somebody really close to me who was a youth overdosed, and it makes me think about my own kids and if they were in that situation. So yeah, we need more services.
And Miss Wynn.
Yeah, so a few things come to mind. I want to start off by saying I have not talked to the leadership of community youth services recently enough to really know what their numbers look like. But I always think that generally nonprofits could use more funding, and certainly the more local and smaller ones. I think about, yes, absolutely. Could their programs and resources be more adequately funded? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I also think that their workforce could be more adequately funded. The people that work for CYS, at least the ones that I've met, are people that are so compassionate, that care, and that also get burned out. And so we're seeing higher turnover rates, right? Just for social services overall. So what Olympia City Council can do about that, I'm not sure. But I would love to look at funding for not just one nonprofit, but doing a partnership grant so that all of our beautiful nonprofits can work together. Oh, and that's my time.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. CYS is one piece of a puzzle, and we can't ask them to solve all of our problems. They're really a clinical organization that runs our foster care system and some of our homeless system. But like was said before, we need a dedicated shelter for probably kids 15 to 18 that are falling through the cracks at least. My idea in this conversation would be for the city of Olympia to convene a youth council and analyze our youth serving system with a group of kids around the table so they can tell us what's missing. Because as with working with low income people, if we don't have the voices that are most impacted at the table, we aren't going to get ahead of the problem. So that's where I would start, and where I've been hoping we would start for a long time. But a lot of crises, and unfortunately some of our kids are falling through the cracks right now. I can't remember the last time I heard about after school programs. The Olympia Center used to be full on Friday and Saturday night of teenagers, and I don't know why we don't do that. So we should.
Mr. Payne.
Yes, thanks, Rob. I also am a strong proponent of introducing a youth council. I actually think it might be even important to explore the idea of having youth representation in other types of boards and commissions as well, and potentially what we could be missing, a missed opportunity there. I think CYS also has a rental assistance program, which that comes to mind when I think about their funding, especially at a time like this. I think it's important to remember, particularly for foster youth, that transition coming out, being a newly 18 years old, and you are legally an adult and you now have to live on your own. And they rely on those assistance programs to make that transition. And so, yes, I think they likely definitely need more funding.
Thank you. And Ms. Vasquez.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So CYS is Olympia focused, but I think there's still a need to provide services to youth in Lacey also. I am troubled when I hear the numbers of homeless youth, because North Thurston School District keeps account of how many homeless youth we have being served in our communities. And I also know, because I've heard it, I've seen the housing action plan, that we don't have enough emergency shelter. And that, I mean, a byproduct of that is that we don't have a lot of emergency shelter for homeless youth. So I would like to explore a partnership between the school district, the city, and a nonprofit, or maybe multiple service providing nonprofits in Lacey, to create emergency shelter, emergency housing options for youth in Lacey. So that's something that, it's just an idea now, but I want to pursue it because one of those organizations has land, and one of those organizations may have access to funding, and another organization may be able to provide services. So can we build something to help our youth?
Thank you. And I will be handing it back to Dana. She will be doing the rest of the questions, going back and forth. So, Ma, you're muted.
Okay, now I'm not. I have one more. It was from a board member. It was for a specific candidate, but it didn't look like they showed. So I want to ask one more question to all of you, the same group. This individual's rent went up $400 this year. What actions might you be able to take once you're in leadership or in this leadership position for rent stabilization and tenants' rights and protections? Mr. Mitchell?
Sorry, I don't know, the school board would have a lot to.
Oh, whoa,
do
whoa,
with
whoa, I
rent,
got the wrong person.
but-
Where am I at? Miss Parsley? Sorry.
So are you asking what would the city of
They're
Olympia
wanting
be
to know
able to
what
do?
actions you might be able to take to help.
Well, first off, if we could, as a city council, do rent control, that would be something that I would absolutely love the debate and the public process for. I'm right there, but alternative ways. We have to go with our housing action plan, permanently affordable housing. That means 30% of people's income. We need to look at building workforce housing, which is people who have a job can afford it. We do need to look at, how do we look at our landlords? We need to get a landlord registry. Potentially, I've been playing around with an idea in my head. Why aren't we requiring landlords to keep a healthy apartment, healthy multifamily existence for our tenants? But what we do that for restaurants, we do that for all these others. And if they do that and they participate in city money like CBDG for restoration or retrofits, they need to mandate 5 years, no rental increase. We have a lot of work we could do, and including passing a bill of renter protection rights. Absolutely. And then lobby the state.
Cox?
Well, Lacey already has been and will continue to help people with rent. We established a program last year when the COVID epidemic really started hitting us hard, where we set aside, I think it was close to $700,000 that went to the Community Action Council to distribute in rent subsidies, help with utilities, childcare. We continue to support those efforts now through Thurston Strong. And like Lisa, I would love to be able to see rent control happen in our community. I think the way the laws are structured, the best thing that we could probably set our sights on doing is setting a minimum income level, guaranteed minimum income that would lift the boats, that would help people stay housed.
Ms. Mercer?
I think one thing that's being left out of this discussion is the rule. My rent went from $900 to $1,500 in 3 years, a $600 increase. The biggest increase was just last month when it went from $1,150 to $1,500. Those increases were passed on to me because of the tax increases. Property tax increases led to my rent being increased, and nobody will talk about that. My rent was also increased as an unintended consequence of the eviction moratorium, which messed with the free markets on rental, making them extremely scarce. So the rental market rate of rentals went up. So that's why my rent's $1,500 right now, in addition to the housing shortage. But those are the real reasons, and I wish those would be talked about.
Thank you. And Mr. Gilman, yes.
Thanks. This is probably the area where I've spent the most time and energy as a council person. I'm very excited that the city's launched a housing access study to try to broaden our look beyond the work that we'd commissioned through the Regional Planning Council and look at the impact of trying to stabilize existing multifamily housing, whether that's weatherization assistance, financing assistance. What do we do to try to keep those buildings from being gentrified or replaced? That's huge. Supporting Homes First, Habitat, similar programs to to put land essentially into trust, first-time home buyer, those sort of efforts. Renter protections are in progress. We enacted some emergency actions as a COVID measure. We've started a utility assistance program within the city to help low-income folks keep the utilities turned on. And like Lacey, we contributed to the Thurston Strong rent assistance program using our COVID dollars through the Community Action Council.
Ms. Reed?
So I can relate to the person who had that question because my rent did go up also. I think low-income affordable housing, HUD assisted vouchers would help because there are caps on there are maximums on the amount of rent that can be charged, and that would help. We just need more of that. But I think a housing authority that would help manage our landlords and be a resource for renters, homeowners, and homeowners, hopefully. In addition, I think that if we modeled after the housing authority, some of their renter protections, such as landlords would have to pay for a renter's moving costs if they violated any terms of the agreement to raise rent, if they didn't give enough notice and whatnot. There's a lot to it, but I think that really looking at other cities and how they're handling it is appropriate right now.
Thank you. And Ms. Nguyen?
My comments will be brief. Councilmember Gilman did well to address many of the things that the city has already done or are currently making progress on. I share those values and those goals. While we are looking for what we can do to make more of a long-term impact, I would be interested in, if I'm around in January, let's figure out, can we pass an ordinance? Can we do something in the short term to be more responsive to the many people that are telling us that their rent is going up? What can we do in the short term to move towards rent stabilization while we're finding those long-term solutions? I'd also like to say that, we contribute to other things like, we're not the authority on the home share program for senior services of South Sound, for example, but we contribute funds to assist with that program. So we're always looking for ways. We have an ambitious council with time.
And Mr. Cooper?
Yeah, so I'm guessing that $400 is about the average based on the stories I'm hearing. I know a couple that my daughter calls aunties, that are hitting a $700 increase, and they are, senior citizens that have been in a location for a long time. And to think that taxes are causing this is not paying attention to the numbers. I just have to say that out loud. It's pretty clear that we have a broken system, and landlords are taking advantage of it, and a lot of them are small landlords who are just trying to pay their bills too. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that we have to really think through. But when it comes down to it, the thing I would do, the thing that we're the most in control of as a city council, is to pass a 1% income tax and create guaranteed income for as many of our low-income residents as we can. I think that we could at least pay the utility bills for 10,000 households.
Thank you. Mr. Payne.
Yes, thank you for this question. I haven't had the opportunity to mention this or talk about this at all, so I will just say that I'm also interested in exploring UBI. I think that's one way that we could address this particular issue. If I heard in the question that was proposed initially correctly, this person's rent was raised $400 over the last year. So something that doesn't make particular sense to me is if we have an eviction moratorium, why then is a landlord allowed to then raise the rent on a tenant during that moratorium? That does not make sense to me. We should be lobbying the state, not only on that particular issue, but also on making sure that we strike up the conversation on rent stabilization legislation again, because I don't think that Olympia is the only jurisdiction in our city that is suffering from this issue. I think that this is largely a state issue as well.
Thank you. And Ms. Vasquez.
So I think I talked to this person in the example, or I talked to somebody just like them. I met somebody at the door who said, my rent just went up by $400 this month. It's happening all over the place. And although property values are going up, and that means property taxes are going up, nobody's property taxes are going up 30%, which is, if Candace's rent went from $1,150 to $1,500, that's a 30% increase all at once. That's ridiculous. And it's not driven by property values or property wealth. It's driven by the market, right? And so I think I share some of the general concerns and the thoughts about why is it okay? Why is it legal to lift somebody's rent by 30% in 1 month? We can, at the city level, we can focus on providing subsidies, resources, grants, support to individuals who are hanging on the raggedy edge of homelessness when their rents go up. But I don't think it should be okay for someone seeking profit to increase the cost of someone's shelter by 30% in 1 month. And I want to do what I can to say no to that in the future.
Thank you. Did we miss anyone on that one? No. Okay. So I will start. We're going to move to the port candidates. We did not forget you, we promise. Thank you for being patient. So we're going to ask 1 or 2 questions for the port candidates, and then we're going to go into a question or 2 for everyone, depending on time. So my question to the port candidates: for years, we've had protests over the tar sands coming through the port. What are you going to do to support green energy products coming through the port? And we'll start with Mr. Simmons.
Yeah, I think it's all about intentionality. We have to create that culture down at the port. We have to stick to our guns on that and not allow those types of things come through our port, and invest in more green energy. Joel will probably talk about, building solar panels at the port and exporting those, and investing in that type of green energy. I think we could also invest in a fleet of electric ferries that takes people north and up the Puget Sound to Seattle and Tacoma. I think it's just all about investing in the right types of energy and the right types of businesses that we want to see at the port. That's about all I got.
All right, thank you, Mr. Simmons. And Mr. Hanson.
Yeah, there's so much I want to talk about here, but in 1 minute, the first thing I'll say is I want to
right off the bat, get the port to sign on to the thirst and climate mitigation plan and work with our regional partners. There are 60 plus, almost 70 some items in that plan, action items that can be undertaken, and the port has a role to play in many of those. Incentivizing our tenants to make improvements to the built environment that reduce energy costs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of bringing things through the port, making a transition and incentivizing the transition to an electrified transportation system and clean energy. It's what I do for my day job. I build solar projects for my day job. I'm heavily invested mentally, emotionally in this transition that we all need to make. And so also encouraging apprenticeship programs to get more electricians trained and working on this. We are going to need so many more people than we have right now to make the transition. But that's my time. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. And Dana, did you have a question, or was it for everyone? Oh, you muted yourself.
Yes, I'm still trying to figure out the mute too. I want to ask the port candidates. So Mr. Simmons, starting with you, why this position? What are you wanting to do? What's driving you to run for the Port Commission?
Yeah, well, when I first started looking at the port position, I wasn't sure, how my experience, mashed up, but it actually does. I spent some time working at ports when I was in the military. And so and also as an environmental compliance officer, I did port logistics. I did budget management there at the port for the battalion and brigade level. And so I realized that I do actually have hands-on experience at ports, and that would be valuable to the Port of Olympia. I just had to look deeper into what the port actually did, because that's pretty much the question I get at every door is, what does the Port of Olympia actually do? What does it mean to me? And so, yeah, I think, my experience matches up well. And I think that's the main reason I wanted to run for the port. And the other reason is to protect the good living wage jobs that we do have at the port already and grow more. I know Joel talked about apprenticeship programs, and that's actually what I do for my day job, is get people into apprenticeship programs. And so I want to bring that to the port as well.
Time.
Thank you. Just to let you know, I'm a retired after 20 years logging myself, so welcome. Mr. Henson?
Yeah, the port does a couple of different things. It has a role in economic development. The mission of the port is to generate economic benefit for Thurston County and for the people of Thurston County, and then environmental restoration. And because the port operates as a municipal corporation, it brings some different tools in its toolbox than, say, the city of Olympia or the city of Lacey or the city of Tumwater or the county. And so why I want this position at the port is that I want to strengthen our regional relationships with the other jurisdictions. I want to bring the specific tools that the port has to those conversations and to those solutions that we work on regionally. But more importantly, for me, the port has been investing in the economy of yesterday and the economy of today for a long time, and it's time for us to turn and look to the future and make our investments in the world we want to see, the economy we want to see, the Thurston County we want to see 20, 30, 40 years from now. And the time to make those investments is now, to realize that world we want to see.
Okay, so starting with Ms. Parsley, this is going to be for everyone. Do you have any LGBTQ family members and or friends? And if so, how have you supported them?
Yes, to all of those. How have I supported them? Well, I will be right up front. In 1979, when I had a very dear high school friend who happened to be the son of Vera Katz, who was the mayor of Portland, Oregon at the time, I wasn't very good. But after the second time the football team beat him up, I woke up, and I have been awake since then. I made sure that Jesse and our friends were around him after school, before school. Since then, I've taken off. I joined PFLAG because one of my dearest, oldest, longest friends, she's still a teacher in Oakland, California, came out as a lesbian. and I've been a fan of her, and I consider her my family. Since then, I've had nieces and cousins come out. You know, being and yourself is the most important thing we can do. You should not look at someone for who they choose to be, who they orient with, or who they love. And my support will always be that way.
Thank you. Ms. Cox?
Right. Well, yes to both. And probably the one that strikes closest to home is I have a stepsister who is lesbian, who came out to her mom as in her late teens. And I loved her mom to pieces, but she could not accept that Lori was gay. And this set up years of heartbreak in our family. Their relationship was never the same. And even to the point when my stepmother was dying, she did not want Lori in the hospital with her. One positive thing that came of that is that my dad was a very good-looking man who probably got hit on in the Navy, and it made him a homophobe. And he, despite that, he grew and he stepped up, and he provided the support for Lori that her mom couldn't give her. So, yeah, it's been a very powerful experience.
Okay, Ms. Mercer?
I'm LGB myself, so we can start there. So I go way back in the community. My senior paper in high school was about transvestites and transsexuals, which was what the terminology was then, and that was 1981. I'm not going to use my family for political gain. They are off limits, but I do have what I call my gay family. When I went to college, I fell in with a group of gay men, and they are my friends and family to this day. I've been doing this work since the 80s. I originally started, doing activism actually around AIDS and HIV and ACT UP in New York City. I've done numerous artworks featuring AIDS as a topic matter, really hard-hitting artwork. I've been at Pride in New York City when AIDS was at its peak, and there was a moment of silence in Manhattan.
Hi, Ms. Mercer.
Thank you.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes, I almost forgot how to unmute myself. So the answer is yes. Honestly, I've always considered myself an ally, but I never really thought about what that meant until, less than a year ago, my oldest came out as trans to us. And, so it's really personal to me. I learned where I was failing. And so I learned that I had a lot more to learn. And so I'm just, happy to be supporting him every day and still learning from him and doing what I can to understand and push him to be the best person he can be. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gilman? You're muted.
Oh, that was the best part too. Sorry you missed it. I'll try again. I don't know, being a guy who pink and purple are my favorite colors. I've been a straight guy, but I've been pushed down the stairs a few times. I've had that, so somehow I ended up with a lot of gay friends through school and through my activism. And this last year, I've been really privileged to be seeing a friend weekly as she transitioned transgender, and to have that confidence and share the struggle and the experience has been really special. And I worked as a paraeducator at South Sound High School and got to help coordinate the pizza clutch and be sort of the grumpy uncle mentor with a lot of kids who were really wrestling with coming out sexual identity things during that time. So I guess I'd close by saying I have mentors, friends, heroes, teachers, and a pastor who are LGBTQ+.
Thank you. Ms. Reed?
Yes, I have family friends, my best friends, and most of my coworkers are. And how I support them is, first I educated myself and asked them questions so that I know what their needs are. But I've fundraised for them. I've housed them. I have included them in my organizing and calling on them as the leaders they are in this community and are not usually recognized, to educate the community, and just respecting them. I mean, but I think the most important thing that I can do is include them in the work that I do. So my friends, family, coworkers are all involved in everything I do, and they continue to teach me.
Ms. Nguyen.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, absolutely. How do I support? I listen with an open mind. When I'm told about experiences, I believe them. I understand that everyone's experiences are valid and that there's really no one experience that is the monolith for the group, right? I learn through educating myself. There are plenty of resources that are available, and I try to use those. Though I certainly listen when something is shared, but not leaning on a marginalized group to use their emotional resources to educate me. And I do my darnest to continue being a better ally and continuing to learn what that means. To just generally, I do that by seeking ways to use my privilege as a platform to support the LGBTQ+ community every opportunity I have. Thanks for the question.
Mr.
Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, I was brought up to, with the teachings that our differences are what make us the strongest. And I live by that. My sister's a proud lesbian, and I really love seeing her come out and teach her kids and take her kids to Pride and, show them what equity is from a young age. And it's been a good model for me with my own daughter. I, like Clark, I'm thinking about this, and I think maybe it's the type of kids we were, but I have, just as many, if not more, GLBTQ friends as I do straight ones, and largely because they're the people that I find that care about everyone in the community, and I want to be close to. So, how have I supported them? In my, I identify as a flaming ally. Be loud and proud, and hope that everyone I know will be an ally if they're not GLBTQ. And in the city work, it's about getting having recognizing Trans Day of Remembrance is a small item. We're sitting down with trans leaders in our community to negotiate an agreement. And then yesterday we went down and repainted the mural on 4th Avenue just as a small thing. So.
Mr. Payne?
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if I look frozen to you, but I'm frozen on my end. But anyway, I'll just say that I am an openly gay man. This year will mark the 17th year that I've lived my life openly. And I'm running as an openly gay candidate. And I do that specifically for one reason. And that is, it's not really about me and my family. This is about showing voters, showing the community that LGBTQ plus people are capable of doing anything that they want to do in their lives. Some things that I have done, I will just say, I will go with something simple, and that is to have conversations with people and to answer people's questions. And I try to do that as much as possible and be as patient as possible when I have those questions. And I think specifically for me, uplifting trans people and trans people of color is extremely important right now. And so every opportunity that I have, I do that because they're going through a struggle right now that I think
it's time, Mr. Payne.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Vasquez?
So yes and yes, just like everybody else. I remember when my cousin Jake came out to me, and I think he was a little underwhelmed by my reaction because I just said, cool. I can't imagine being another way. that wasn't the reception that Jake got from the rest of our family, or there were some members of our family that really struggled with his coming out, but he's still Jake. When I was in high school, I had two friends, Nicole and Xanthi, who were lesbians. And Bremerton's not the middle of nowhere, but there were certainly elements of conservatism in the policies that were in place in my school. So I actually wrote protest letters. I wrote letters to the editor. I spoke up because I saw a disparate application of the rules happening to my friends Nicole and Xanthi when they talked about their experiences as lesbians versus the rules that were applied to people talking about straight relationships. You know, I attend pride events. I identify as bi. I participate in roller derby, where it's super normal to just have all orientations and it's very
time. I'm
inclusive.
sorry. See, I get so enthralled listening. I'm glad I have my son keeping time. Mr. Hanson.
I'll try and be quick and use the time efficiently. The answer is yes. And just as one example that comes to mind, when I was in my early 20s, I had a good friend, John, that passed away from complications from AIDS. And I was so moved that I wanted to do something to honor his spirit and his legacy. And I went to the United Communities AIDS Network. And as a young straight guy, I joined the board and became the vice president and the president of the board of UCAN, and the work that they were doing in the empowerment project and with the needle exchange and all that kind of stuff. And it's where I first started in my service to the community. And one of the things that came out, there was many lessons I learned along the way in my time there, but one of the things that really was eye-opening for me was that as a clean-cut, straight Eagle Scout, I didn't have the word privilege at the time in my vocabulary, but I was let into the room in places when I was trying to fundraise for UCAN, at the bank president's office, at business associations, where others raising money for that organization had never been allowed before.
Thank you. Mr. Cliffhorn.
Thank you. Yes, yes, and yes. We identify as a queer household. Prior to our cis presenting, heteronormative presenting relationship, my wife and I both had same-sex partners, and so that's a part of our life, and it's a part of our community and our friends and people we've stood for over the years. And in addition to having some family members that have recently come out as trans, so we're a supportive, inclusive household and family, and it started a long time ago. I did fundraising for Hands Off Washington. If folks have been around in the area long enough to remember that work back in '93 and '94, when I was a young, fresh-faced high school student, I distributed condoms for the Pierce County AIDS Foundation when I was an undergraduate in Tacoma. I helped lead a trans-inclusive speaking series at the University of Puget Sound.
Time.
So
sorry.
It's the work. I love it. Thank you.
Ms. Huffman.
Well, yes, and yes to all of those. So some of the things, besides just being personally close to people and being good listeners, I worked really hard for marriage equality to get that passed and for that initiative. I also did a lot of fighting for with my church to do a welcoming statement. I'm a member of the ELCA, which welcomes all people, and I know that church has hurt a lot of LGBTQ people, and so we wanted to make sure that it was a welcoming, open, warm place for that community to attend. We've been great supporters of Pizza Clutch. It's one of the best things that we have in our schools, as well as in our community. And I will continue to be a supporter of that for like ever and ever. And again, just thinking of being a good friend.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
Yes. One of my sisters identifies as a cisgender lesbian, and she's been happily married to her wife now for a number of years. And, my wife and I were proud to be able to be there for when they were married in Massachusetts, which is one of the first states to allow gay marriage, and, there's been so much progress in the areas of social equity around LGBTQ issues, but, there's still a ton of work to be done. I know their oldest is a non-binary child who, uses they, them pronouns. And, they've really met some resistance trying to work with the schools around how to, use the proper pronouns and to help with peer understanding. So, absolutely, I'm very sympathetic to these issues and looking forward to helping to grow our inclusivity in the schools. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around, and we didn't do it at the beginning, but since it's the end, I want everybody to know who you are and what you're running for. And then we're just going to keep going through, and that's how we're going to end. Ms. Parsley?
So is this just a quick who we are, just so I'm clear?
Yeah.
I don't want to take too
Who
much.
you
Okay.
are, your name, and what position you're running for.
I'm Lisa Parsley. I am running for re-election to the Olympia City Council, position number 5.
Ms. Cox?
I am Carolyn Cox. I am running for re-election to Lacey City Council, position 7. And thank you.
Ms. Mercer?
I'm Candace Mercer, and I'm running for Olympia City Council, position 4.
Mr. Simmons?
Hi, I'm Jesse Simmons, and I'm running for Port of Olympia Commissioner in District 2.
Mr. Gilman?
I'm Clark Gilman, and I'm running to keep a socialist grandpa on the Olympia City Council.
Ms. Reed?
I'm Tawana Reed, and I'm running for the Olympia City Council, position number 5.
Ms. Wynn?
I'm Ian Quinn, and I would be so honored to earn your support to retain me for Olympia City Council position 2.
Mr. Cooper?
Mr. Cooper? Yes.
Sorry, you went one out of order, so I wasn't sure. So, I'm Jim Cooper, running to retain my position, re-election for Olympia City Council, position 7. Find out more at electjimcooper.com.
Ms. Vasquez?
I'm Robin Vasquez. I'm running for Lacey City Council, position 4. It's my first election.
Mr. Henson?
I'm Joel Hansen. I'm running for Port of Olympia Commissioner in District 3.
Mr. Cliffhorn?
I'm Scott Clifthorn. I'm running for re-election to the Olympia School District Board of Directors, position 5. Thank you.
I'm Darcy Huffman, and I'm running for the Olympia School Board of Directors, position 3.
Mr. Mitchell?
Don Mitchell. I'm running as candidate for Olympia School Board, position 5.
Mr. Payne?
I'm Dante Payne, and I am a first-time candidate running for Olympia City Council, position 6.
I want to thank you all today for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The video will be posted by tomorrow. And
Awesome.
sent
Thanks
to
for
your
having me.
campaigns.
I want to thank you all. I know you didn't have enough time for the questions, and we had a lot that we received, but this gives our members the ability to see you, hear you, and then they can continue to do their own research on you, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to all of you.
Thank you.